Thank you all for coming. My name is Mike Melio. I'm the founder of Colorado Move to Amend and recently established the Westminster Community Rights Network. Thank you all for setting aside some of the time in your busy schedules to learn more about how we can reclaim our democracy from the moneyed interests. This is the Establishing a Community Bill of Rights. As many of you already know, democracy is in trouble in these United States. The Supreme Court, in a series of decisions ranging over the course of 100 years, has endowed corporations with rights that were once reserved only for human beings. The right of free speech, the right to participate in the political process, the right of equal protection under the law, and about 6 other rights, once reserved for us, have been granted to corporations. With these ill-gotten rights, corporations, with the aid of the courts, have overturned the will of the people all across this nation, allowing them to pollute our water, poison our air, and destroy the fertility of the land, all in the name of a presumed corporate rights doctrine. To make matters worse, there has never been a more critical time for the people of this country to take action on global problems that threaten the very existence of human life on this earth. We are all familiar with the phenomenon of climate change and global warming. The verdict is in. 98% of climate scientists have confirmed that the planet is warming and caused by human industrial activity. The burning of fossil fuels, oil, coal, and gas, has warmed the planet so much that the ice caps are melting, sea levels are rising, the oceans are becoming more acidic, and hundreds of human habitations along the seacoasts are now in jeopardy. But did you know that we are also in the midst of the largest mass extinction since the age of the dinosaurs, some 65 million years ago? It's true. The estimates vary, but in the last 150 years, we've lost as few as 30% and as much as 50% of all species on planet Earth due to human activity. The primary cause of this great extinction is habitat loss. With the advent of petrochemical herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizers that are now used extensively throughout the world, we are witnessing the depletion of soil nutrients and microorganisms, the decimation of bees, butterflies, and other pollinators. These petrochemicals and their byproducts, like plastics and styrofoam, are also killing fish and birds in large numbers. Every ocean on the planet now has a super large garbage patch that spans hundreds and even thousands of miles, filled with petrochemical plastics of every conceivable shape and size. In short, humanity and human activity driven by corporate profits is killing life on planet Earth. The real agents of our demise are the corporate and moneyed powers that control finance, commerce, and industry, and especially those corporate actors that corrupt the political process and make it nearly impossible for the people to address the causes of this mass extinction. The picture is bleak, but there is hope, and there are solutions. Today, we will look at one of the most promising directions we have in addressing corporate power, and with it, our collective global crises. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Lafayette City Councilor Marilee Mazza, who will show a video and then discuss community rights, corporate power, and the Colorado Community Rights Amendment. Marilee?
I wanted to point something out. Lafayette is dealing with an issue with fracking. We're right next to Erie, of course, and we are on kind of the western edge of that shale formation. There are wells in Lafayette currently. They're old. There are some abandoned wells as well. So this is an issue in our community. But there's other issues. Other issues are development, minimum wage, GMOs. Those are an issue that affect local communities as well. So when I'm speaking about fracking, when I switch to the state ballot initiative, I'm going to give you a different perspective because the state ballot initiative doesn't even use the word fracking at all. So it's another whole approach to this. But I was at a meeting last summer, and the president of the Colorado Petroleum Association was there, and we were speaking about various ballot initiatives. He made a very telling comment about the community rights ballot initiative, saying that was the one that the industry was very concerned about, as opposed to the other initiatives that Jared Polis had proposed and eventually pulled. Moore County, New Mexico, the county passed a community rights initiative. They were, again, also dealing with fracking. And we used the little quote on our slides. This is from the Independent Petroleum Association of New Mexico that said this issue is the beginning. I like to use their words and not ours because we would like to say this, but they said it for us. Beginning of a social movement that is greater than just the oil and gas industry. It's a potential game changer for all of corporate America. Yay! So can you flip through? I also like to use this slide. We use it in a lot of presentations. This is showing the land holdings of Anadarko because a lot of people think, well, it's only those people up north near Erie and Greeley. They're going to get slammed, and it won't affect anybody else in the state. The yellow areas show the land holdings of Anadarko. So it's throughout the Front Range right into Denver. Okay, switch. This is what our Lafayette Community Rights Amendment says and what it did. Of course, we wanted to ban oil and gas development within the city limits of our town, which is a town of 27,000 people. That's very, it was an old mining town. It's very suburban now, so it's very dense population. So we banned oil and gas development, the disposal of industrial waste, the addition of new oil and gas infrastructure. We did not ban any existing wells. They still stay there. But in addition to that, our charter amendment said that we have a right to community self-government, that the people are sovereign. The Colorado Constitution says that too. That we have a right to clean air and water, that we have a right to be free from chemical trespass, that we have a right to peaceful enjoyment of home, that our ecosystem has rights, and that we have a right to a sustainable energy future. So if you want to flip again. Our charter amendment also says that we negate corporate personhood. So we really took a stand for a small, tiny town in Colorado. We took it on. And we said corporations who violate these rights that we've defined for our community do not have the right of persons afforded by the U.S. and Colorado Constitution. So we're addressing that directly. Okay. So if you want to flip again. I want Michael to switch to the video now because I want to show you a little overview. This video is produced by the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund out of Pennsylvania. We work with them very closely in Lafayette. We work with them very closely on the state ballot initiative. Oregon is proposing a community rights state ballot initiative along with us in 2016. So this is going to give you a little background on how come we took this approach. Why didn't we just do the Longmont thing and say we're going to ban fracking?
Welcome to So Your Community is Going to Be Fracked, Mined, Factory Farmed, or fill in the blank. Want to stop it? What to know and where to start. This is CELDEF's primer, the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund's primer, on rights-based organizing. I'm Thomas Lindsay. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. So, your community is about to be hydrofracked for shale gas, corporate factory farmed, used as a dumping ground for sewage sludge, drilled for corporate water withdrawals, used as a laboratory for genetically modified seeds, used for a transmission line, pipeline, or other energy project, or any of 1,000 other corporate projects that your community doesn't want. You've picked up the phone and called anyone that you think should help you, including your state government's environmental agency, your local government, and or environmental organizations. Your state Department of Environmental Protection told you, yes, there's been a permit application submitted by the XYZ Corporation for that project. We're receiving public comments for the next 30 days. Once the permit issues, you can hire an attorney and appeal the permit. To win that appeal, you'll have to show that the agency failed to follow the regulations that apply to that project. What your state environmental agency didn't tell you: that the regulations that the agency is following in issuing the permit were written by the very industry that the regulations are ostensibly supposed to regulate. Your local government had this to say: our hands are tied. This is a state issue. Go talk to the state environmental agency or to your state legislator. Here's what your local government won't tell you. For the past century, your municipal government has been stripped of almost all authority over projects like the one that you're facing. Asking them to take a stand on this issue is akin to asking them to confront their own state government and the corporations that have driven those legal changes. They didn't sign up for that. The environmental groups had this to say: we can help you get the best permit possible by working with the state regulatory agency and against the agency, but we can't help you say no to the project because the law doesn't recognize your authority to stop it. What the environmental groups won't tell you: that this has been the law for over 100 years. Communities can't prohibit what state law permits. And because your community is prohibited from banning those unsustainable projects, you can't create sustainable agricultural systems, sustainable energy systems, sustainable economies, real environmental protection, or protections for your health, safety, and welfare. In other words, your community is prohibited from developing its own resources in a sustainable way that won't harm people or the natural environment, strengthening its local economy, protecting its quality of life, and determining its own future. To recap, your state agency, your local government, environmental groups, and even the corporations themselves funnel you into the state regulatory system, where you are trapped within a system of law which was developed by those with an interest in exploiting your community. Under this state regulatory system, the burden is on you to show why the permit shouldn't be issued, and your community must shoulder the cost for lawyers just to make sure that the corporation's own regulations are followed. Meanwhile, the costs paid for the corporation's lawyers are tax deductible. What happens if your community chooses to pass a law which bans something that state or federal law allows? Your municipality can then be sued by a private corporation in either state or federal court for violating one or all of 4 key legal doctrines that prohibit community decision-making. The 4 key legal doctrines that prohibit your community from making decisions are: the first one of the 4, state and federal preemption, whereby higher levels of government specifically prohibit your community from making decisions about certain activities, such as when state oil and gas acts preempt local fracking laws. And second of the 4, Dillon's rule, which requires specific state authorization, legislative authorization, for your municipality to enact any local laws. This is what the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania, in a case known as Attorney General versus Packer Township, had to say. This is a case in which the state of Pennsylvania was taking a local Pennsylvania municipality to court over its attempt to try to stop corporate sewage sludge from being dumped within the municipality. This is what they had to say about the relationship between local governments and the state. The law, quote, does not recognize or protect the rights of local governments from encroachment by state government. The authority of the legislature over their powers is supreme. The 4 legal doctrines continued. Number 3, the constitutional right of corporations to engage in interstate commerce. In other words, under the law, corporations have a right to engage in interstate commerce. And doctrine number 4, the constitutional rights of corporations as persons. This is corporate personhood under both state and federal constitutions. Those are the 4 legal doctrines. Here's how one court characterized the relationship between your municipality, your community, and these corporate rights. This is Chief Judge Danetta Ambrose of the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Pennsylvania in a case brought by a coal corporation against a municipality to overturn an ordinance that had been adopted to attempt to stop longwall coal mining within the municipality. This is what Judge Ambrose had to say. Quote, the United States Supreme Court has repeatedly recognized that corporations have the right to assert the very sort of constitutional claims alleged by plaintiffs herein to overturn local laws. Thus, your community is stuck inside a very small box, the box of allowable activism, whose sides are defined by those 4 legal doctrines that we just covered. Here's what the box looks like. The box of allowable activism. That's your community in the middle, and it's bounded or bordered by the 4 legal doctrines: Dillon's Rule, state and federal preemption, corporate personhood rights, corporate commerce clause rights, which all press in on the borders of your community to define what you can and cannot do. If your community steps outside that box by adopting new laws, banning the corporate threat, not only do you face a corporate lawsuit asserting that your community has violated those 4 doctrines, but your community can also be sued for monetary damages for violating the corporation's civil rights under a federal law originally adopted to protect the rights of newly freed slaves after the Civil War. That's Title 42 of the United States Code, Section 1983. This is what Pennsylvania Attorney General Tom Corbett had to say in a case brought by the state of Pennsylvania versus a local government in the state that was attempting to stop sludge from being spread within the municipality. This is what Attorney General Tom Corbett had to say. Quote, there is no inalienable right to local self-government. There is no inalienable right to local self-government. As one graduate of the Legal Defense Fund's organizer training class, known as Democracy Schools, which was hosted by an indigenous community, recently remarked, at least we know that we live on a reservation. Given that we have no right to decide what happens in our own communities, how do we create that right and then use it to protect our communities and the environment? Moving towards rights-based organizing. So what's our choice? We can either, 1, do nothing, which is the easiest choice, but then we get drilled or fracked or whatever. Choice number 2, participate in the regulatory system, but then we also will get drilled or fracked. Or 3, do something else outside the box. Moving outside of the box to conduct rights-based organizing. Rights-based organizing is a shorthand phrase for communities who are beginning to seize their local governments to create new laws, which, first, stop the imminent project, the imminent threat, and second, push upwards to change state and federal law. But I thought we couldn't do that. If we accept the corporate legal doctrine that our communities can't use their own local governments to stop that which threatens to harm us, then we might as well throw in the towel now and move to another community, if we can find an unaffected one. After all, this country's ostensible foundation, as we've been taught since kindergarten, is based on the following ideas: self-government, consent to the governed, and majority rules. Indeed, almost all of our state constitutions contain provisions that people fought and died for, like this early Pennsylvania Constitution selection. That government is or ought to be instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the people, nation, or community, and not for the particular advantage of any single man, family, or set of men who are only part of that community, and that the community hath an indubitable, unalienable, and indefeasible right to reform, alter, or abolish government in such manner as shall be by that community judged most conducive to the public weal. And of course, our very own Declaration of Independence, which declares that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So where do we start? First, with the recognition that we're on the receiving end of over 200 years of manipulation of our legal system intended to insulate the project, whether that's fracking, mining, or other project, that you're facing from community control. Second, with an understanding that almost everyone believes that the legal system, even if it forces an unwanted project into our community, is democratic, and that therefore we should all be obedient to those laws and regulations. Third, with an understanding that you're not alone. Thousands of other communities are also being funneled into this system, and many of them are right down the road, literally, from you. Fourth, with the knowledge that movements that came before you have run into the same situation, a system of law written for a minority of people that guaranteed the infliction of certain harms. These movements joined people and communities together to drive structural changes into the highest levels of government. And fifth, that if you move in a direction to challenge the existing structure of law, that most legal experts and governmental officials will think that you're crazy, as they did with prior movements, like those that freed the slaves and that made women persons. So where do we start? Well, that sounds incredibly easy. Where do we start? First, ask whether people in your community care about the proposed corporate activity, and if they do, host a gathering and invite affected community members to it. At the gathering, ask people what they want, not what they can get under the existing system, and whether they're willing to work to make that happen. Third, if you feel there's enough support to move forward, begin drafting a local law that would deliver what you want. You can contact the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund to assist with that drafting. Over 150 communities in the United States have already adopted local laws that stop unwanted and harmful corporate projects while directly challenging the existence of the four corporate legal doctrines that stood in their way. These laws, adopted by communities, establish community bills of rights, establishing the right to local self-government, the right to a healthy environment, the right to water, and protections for the natural environment. Those laws prohibit corporate fracking and other activities that would violate those rights. They redefine corporate rights and powers of corporations violating the local law, and they invalidate state permits that violate the local law. In addition, these local laws recognize rights for ecosystems and nature, thus challenging one of the fundamental underpinnings of our current legal system, that the natural environment is property, and thus that those who own the most property can destroy the most nature. To draft a law for your community, ask, what rights do we feel are being violated by the corporate project? How do we define the types of projects that we're seeking to ban or control? What else needs to be included to make the local law supportable by the local community? Next, ask how the community is going to get the law adopted. Will the local government adopt it? Can we put enough pressure on local elected officials to adopt something that runs counter to state law? Is there another process, like citizens' initiative, that we can use to override our local elected officials and adopt the law? Adopting a law through home rule. If your local government refuses to adopt the law and you lack an initiative process to directly place it onto the ballot, you may have a home rule process available through which you can write a new charter for your municipality, which includes the ordinance's provisions. Balancing everything out. Key questions to consider. First, what's the easiest way to get the law adopted? And secondly, what's the fastest way to get the law adopted? Won't the municipality get sued? It might. It all depends on how badly the corporation wants to use your community. Ideally, the law would stand and the corporate project would go away. If that doesn't happen, these local laws serve another purpose. If the corporation sues your municipality, the local law forces the corporation to become the aggressor against your community, openly wield the rights and powers specifically challenged by your local law, and use your state legislature to pass laws preempting local decision-making in an attempt to control your renegade community. All of which continues to remove the illusion that we actually govern our own communities and that we actually live in a democracy. From carefully designing this response by corporations and state governments to our communities, a critical mass of people focused on structural change can emerge. This work is now leveraging escalations into the creation of statewide community rights networks to begin to drive constitutional change at the state level to eliminate doctrines embedded in state law. In February of 2010, the Pennsylvania Community Rights Network was created. In June of 2012, the New Mexico Coalition for Community Rights was launched. In July of 2012, the Washington Community Rights Network was formed. And in February of 2013, the New Hampshire Community Rights Network was launched. In your own organizing, the first serious effort in your state to adopt a rights-based law marks the beginning step towards establishing a statewide network of other similar communities. That network will then not only provide help to other communities, but will begin to work at the state level to eliminate certain doctrines that the local laws already repudiate. These state-based movements will change state constitutions to recognize a protected right to local self-government. The escalation will build from there, forcing corporations to respond by wielding federally guaranteed corporate constitutional rights in attempts to quell these state uprisings. And from there, the movement will then force changes to the U.S. Constitution to recognize a federally protected right to local self-government. How long will this take? The short answer is, until it's done. It's taken several hundred years to get here, and it's going to take a while to fix it. Where we stand today. Working with CELDF, 150 communities like yours in 8 states have adopted these local laws. State community rights networks have been launched in 4 states. Constitutional amendments have been prepared for introduction in 4 state legislatures. And over 5,000 community activists and lawyers have graduated from CELDF's Democracy School trainings. What is Democracy School? Democracy schools are CELDF's 2-day trainings for municipal officials, community leaders, and lawyers. They examine the history of the regulatory system and of rights-based organizing, including why communities can't say no to fracking and other threats. They look at how corporations wield their rights against communities, and they explore how other communities are bringing rights-based organizing to their cities and towns. For help with rights-based organizing, contact us, the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, at celdef.org, that's C-E-L-D as in David, F as in Frank.org, by phone at 717-498-0054, or by email at info@celdef.org.
This is exactly what we did in Lafayette. We passed a community bill of rights, and in that community bill of rights, we banned fracking. And Michael, you'll bring up my slides again. Great. And now we are working again on a state ballot initiative. We're also working with the state of Oregon. He said there were 4 states. There's actually more than that now. Colorado has a statewide community rights network. So does Oregon, and so does several other states. So we're moving ahead along that line. We were very interested, and we looked at what Longmont did in terms of the fracking ban. We looked at what other communities did, and we said we don't want that approach. That's too easy to fight. We want corporations to fight us on the basis of community rights and the right to self-government. We want to address that issue. There's some other slides, if you'll pull them up, they're coming. Oh, okay.
It's taking a while to warm up.
So we went to our city council in Lafayette, our group, and we said, we want you to first we asked them to pass a moratorium on fracking in Lafayette. They said, oh my God, our hands are tied, we can't do that. Everybody got all crazy, just like he said. And so we decided that we were going to do a citizens initiative. Lafayette is a home rule city, so we have the option of doing that. And we created our ballot initiative with the community rights language. And we went out and got petitions. Rick is going to talk about how we did that and how we organized. And we managed to get it passed. We had an objection to the language from some guy who worked at Halliburton and moved to Lafayette 6 months before that, and he was funded by COGA. It didn't work. We got the signatures we needed. We got it on the ballot. It passed with 61% of the votes in Lafayette in that election in 2013. And so we were waiting. By the way, while we were waiting, the city council got very nervous at that time, and they said, oh my God, this thing looks like it's going to pass. We better do something. So before it ever went to the ballot, before people voted on it, they actually passed a moratorium, which we had asked them to do, and they did. And within weeks, they got a threatening letter from COGA. Now, the city didn't broadcast that. We happened to be in a meeting, and one of the city councilors said, just was furious about this letter. And so the next day I called the city clerk and I said, I want to see that letter. It's public information. And of course, it was COGA telling them, don't you dare do this. Okay. COGA is the Colorado Oil and Gas Association. That's the lobbying and trade group for the industry in the state of Colorado. So anyway, we passed it, and we got sued right away, within a month. We knew that was going to happen. That happened in Fort Collins, it happened in Broomfield, it happened in Longmont, and so we were sure that was going to happen. They sued. We filed, our organization, which is a Lafayette organization, is called East Boulder County United. We filed to be an intervener in that suit and said, we want to participate. We want to describe this issue of community rights. And we knew when the city defended that suit, they weren't going to go along that route. They weren't going to talk about community. Nobody wants to talk about that. That's a touchy subject. The industry doesn't want to talk about it because it's too pointed. It points out to communities that you actually have no rights. So they don't want to go there. We asked for intervener status. It was disallowed by the Boulder County Circuit Court because it said we were bringing in to this lawsuit extrinsic issues. The extrinsic issues were the community rights. So the city of Lafayette actually did try to defend the suit in their own way. They used a very odd way of going about it. The Boulder Circuit Court ruled in favor of COGA, the trade organization, on the basis of state preemption. They never addressed the issue of community rights, ever. They never brought it up in their response. It never came up. It was like it didn't exist in this charter amendment. Okay, go on again. After the city lost, they declined to appeal that decision. That came up before city council. It was a 4-3 vote. And they based that decision on cost. They said it would have cost $30,000, by the way, in a $45 million budget, $35,000 to carry this appeal through the Supreme Court, and they didn't want to do that. So anyway, East Boulder County United has appealed that summary judgment and the ruling on intervener status, so that's where it stands right now. There are appeals pending to this being brought by East Boulder County United. The other thing I wanted to mention is because we passed this with the majority of our voters, a very democratic vote, everybody passed it, it's in our city charter, and the city and the courts ruled against us. 2 Lafayette residents filed a class action lawsuit against Governor Hickenlooper and the Colorado Oil and Gas Association for violating their constitutional right to local self-government. This appeal is also, it's on hold while the other 2 appeals go through. So, and I wanted to point something else out because we talk about fracking a lot in the Front Range, and a lot of communities are faced with that. By the way, the first community that tried to ban it was actually Greeley in 1992. That was called the Voss decision. But in the 90s, Summit County, after a leak in a gold mining pit where it released cyanide into the Alamosa River and killed 17 miles of the Alamosa River, Summit County voted to ban the use of cyanide in gold mining. And they lost that suit exactly the same way we did. Now, there's a lot of debate. The industry will say, right, and say, I've been doing it for 60 years, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to tell you what the chemicals are. Nobody disputes that cyanide will kill you. Okay? And so they banned cyanide. They lost that suit. on the same basis as Lafayette, state preemption. The state can preempt you, so suck it up. Okay? So you can go on to the next slide. So this is the statewide level. It's called Colorado Community Rights Network. If you Google that, you'll come up with our website. You'll see what we're doing. You'll see what we're planning. And you can find out where we are with our state ballot initiative. We are going to be releasing a press release next week about this. We attempted a state ballot initiative in 2014. You have to do it in even-numbered years in the state of Colorado. Our state ballot initiative made it all the way through the Colorado Supreme Court. Interestingly enough, the reason we ended up in the Colorado Supreme Court with that state ballot initiative is because the Colorado Mining Association objected to it. The Colorado Mining Association. So it isn't just the oil and gas industry. Made it through the Supreme Court. By the time it got through all the challenges, we only had about 10 weeks to collect over 100,000 signatures, which just was not enough time. This time we're going to go at it with a lot more time. And if you go on our website, you'll eventually be able to see the language of that ballot initiative. It actually never uses the word fracking. It says we have a right to local self-government. Very simple. Doesn't say fracking. Doesn't say mining, says nothing. In fact, you could use that to interpret and say we have a right to create a local minimum wage in our community, something else that's preempted by the state at this point. So that's where we're moving along. We're going along with the state ballot initiative. Lafayette is still moving forward with their appeals. The city of Windsor is looking at a community rights ballot initiative. And we have some interest from Erie as well. So, and we've had some interest from Huerfano County. Westminster too, absolutely. And the other thing I would encourage you all to do is run for local office, because you cannot do this at the state level. You can't go to your state legislature and say you need to do something. Our state legislator told me that the state legislature is controlled by the oil and gas industry. Yes. So if anything affects them, they vote on it, that's it. That's where it goes. So you have no hope there. It has to come from the local level and move up, and local grassroots activists. Okay, thank you.
Well, hello everyone. Yes, I'm indeed Rick Casey, and I never got involved in politics before in my life because I grew up during Watergate and Vietnam and all that. But when Citizens United passed in 2010, I said, what's all the uproar about this? And I read 2 books about corporate personhood, got pretty upset myself, and that's when I started getting involved in politics in Boulder, and that's where I met Michael. We both worked on establishing Move to Amend chapters here in the state. Move to Amend is one of the responses to Citizens United and the outrageous fact that corporations now have First Amendment rights, which allows unlimited amounts of money in politics. So long story short, we succeeded in getting the Boulder City Council to put a referendum on the ballot in 2011, I believe it was. Fall of 2011. And it was just a referendum. It has no legally binding laws associated with it, but it passed in Boulder by over 70%, where it said that we, the city and people of Boulder, believe that there should be a constitutional amendment, a United States constitutional amendment, that says that corporations are not entitled to constitutional rights, and that money is not speech. So that's passed in hundreds of towns across the country, actually. But that's not enough. That's not enough just to have a referendum, and it's a very big lift to pass a United States constitutional amendment. The last time that was seriously attempted was the ERA during the 70s. They came this close to doing it, but it didn't pass. And so getting a constitutional amendment to say that corporations are not entitled to constitutional rights is the right thing to do, but it's extremely difficult. And this is the power of doing things at the local community level. Because as you just saw, as Marilee explained, we did succeed in passing the Lafayette Community Rights Act that in it, in very narrow language, says that corporations are not entitled to constitutional rights. And this is how the law changes. Like Thomas Lindsay said, it took us a couple hundred years to get into this mess. It's going to take a while to straighten it out. So I'm here to tell you about the human story of East Boulder County United and how this came about. This background that you see here is a collage of pictures that I created out of pictures given to me by other activists, and that was the background of the first generation of East Boulder County's United's website. And that website is still up, but it's now in a second generation where the website has been much improved over what I did initially. But slide. And so in August 2012, East Boulder County United just started as a Facebook page by Cliff Wilming. And in open disclosure, Cliff Wilming is Marilee's son. They moved here independently. But Cliff moved here from Chicago 4 or 5 years ago or so, like that. And he has 2 young children. He works as a nurse. He's very aware of toxicology. And when he started learning that fracking could possibly come within the city limits of Lafayette, he just, got very concerned. And so he just started to do what everybody activist does. You start a Facebook page. And so this is our Facebook page. And I have a background in programming and IT, and so I met Cliff in the summer of 2012 and then started helping him with the IT side of things. Slide. So this is Cliff showing off his new t-shirt. This is one of the first things he did too. He just he doesn't even mention East Boulder County United yet. He just knew that we didn't want to frack Lafayette. And this is a gas well. That's a condenser tank and a flarer that's off of 287. Right beside a church and homes, and we started to become very aware that this could well happen inside the city limits because there's already about 12 or 14 operating wells inside the city limits of Lafayette. Slide. And this is like the first thing that we did. So when you start a community group, I have a whole document about this if you want to get it. It explains the process by which a community group forms, how you get a ballot initiative started, and the kind of challenges you're going to face, because we did not know anything about this. We didn't know how to start a campaign, how to get it on the city ballot, the challenges you face with your city council that's probably a hostile city council. So we were learning as we went along. And one of the first things we did was to help raise money, was to have this showing of Gasland at the Louisville Library, August 30th, 2012. And it just took off from there. It says free, but we were accepting donations. And to help raise awareness about this, we started, posting pictures on our website and our Facebook pages. This is a picture taken by Cliff. That's in Erie. Slide.
Or is it Erie? That's pretty eerie to me.
Oh, it is Erie, yeah.
It's very eerie. Looks like an eerie.
Slide. And so by September 2012, we were getting the idea of what we wanted to do. We hadn't really fully committed to community rights yet ourselves, but we knew that we were going to need to start collecting signatures from people and at first petition our city council. And we got some help from this organization out of Fort Collins called C4SE. And if you go to c4se.org, their website is still up and going, and it's this guy, Fred Kirsch, who started this nonprofit, and they specialize in canvassing. And so they really sort of jump-started our campaign by going out and canvassing something like 1,200 homes in the Lafayette and Louisville communities. And they had this sort of ingenious approach to where they talk to people, and if they agree that they would be in support of this, they have them sign a form that gives them their contact information, and then also they say they give them postage to write a letter, and then they'll come back and pick up a letter. So slide. And so we got a bunch of letters, like between 600 and 800 people signed on to this petition, and many of them contributed a letter that we then filed with our city council. And this was sort of the beginning, but we still didn't know quite what we were going to do, or what we needed to do. And we knew that we had a lot of opposition from the state and from the COGCC, Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. But we were starting to attract attention. And so this is an example of somebody contributing something on the EBCU Facebook page. This is Wendy Leonard. She was an Erie mother. She helped start Erie Uprising, which was one of the first, Erie Rising, and one of the first groups to start resisting fracking within their towns. Unfortunately, they haven't fared very well because they are are still getting drilled up in Erie. And Erie's a weird town because half of it lies in Boulder County and half of it lies in Weld County. So that Weld County is getting drilled. And these things are within, you know, several hundred yards of some people's homes. I mean, you might have read the newspapers last December where between Thanksgiving and Christmas, that's December, like 12 new wells are getting drilled, and the noise and the vibrations were such that their kids couldn't sleep at night, you know. So unfortunately, Erie Rising has not done too well combating fracking, and Wendy Leonard, she and her husband and their 4 young children have actually moved back east. They moved out of state.
When we were organizing all this, there were what, 5 of us?
Yeah.
5.
Yeah.
It doesn't take that many people.
Yeah, it was me, Marilee, Cliff, Mandy Papich, later David Fuller, and that was just another meeting with one of our state representatives, Matt Jones and Mike Foote. Yeah, of course as Marilee said, you know, they'll tell you point blank, we can't do anything. You know, we can put stuff, we can announce bills, but we know it's not going to go anywhere. So nonetheless, we kept plowing on. And by this time, by January, we were getting a more focused idea of exactly, you know, what we would need to do, how you get the wording of your petition, how you get that approved by your county clerk, how you organize people at the precinct level to go out and get signatures, and also collecting signatures at public spaces. You can't collect signatures on private property, like King Soopers. They have the right to just throw you out of there. So you got to stick to public places. But this is our campaign strategy at that point. Anybody's welcome to these slides after this show if you want. But this just shows the basic steps. Slide. And so from January to May, we were still building our volunteer base. You build your volunteer base by holding public meetings such as this and getting people's contact information. You build a newsletter. We started writing a monthly newsletter. You can use MailChimp for that. It's free up to a certain point. So we were leveraging our social networking as best we could. And we knew that by mid-May we had to have our petition filed with the Lafayette City Clerk. And after that petition has been approved, then you can start collecting signatures. And so this is an example of a turf map. This was done using specialized software that a political consultant helped us. She did this for free for us. So those little black numbers are the precincts of Lafayette, the voting precincts. Slide. And this is an example of a walking list where the volunteers would get the names of registered voters with their party affiliation. You can even get their voting history. This is all public record that you can get from your county clerk. It cost us like $50 to get a CD with this information. Then I turned that CD over to this political consultant, and she took that information and cleaned it up. And then I was able to create this kind of the maps and walking lists. So this was our quantitative highlights. So this gives you the target of what you got to get, the number of signatures that you got to get. And of course, you got to get a little bit more than just the minimum because some of them will be thrown out for not being eligible for various reasons. Slide. And this is some of the positive stuff that we knew about our demographics. We actually had a better shot at doing this than Longmont. Slide. This is just a shot of one of our other key volunteers was Rachel Zetterstrom, and she actually had past training as an activist and experience, but then she got a job offer on the Western Slope and had to leave us. But I'm just including this to show you that members may come and go out of your group. The group will survive. You know, it'll keep going. This is at a May protest meeting where the Boulder County Commissioners were resisting passing a moratorium on Boulder County. That's Cliff Wilming on the left with his kid sitting on his shoulders. And the guy on the right in the black t-shirt is Shane Davis. He's another leading anti-fracking activist here in Colorado, whom I know quite well.
That guy in the young kid is Earth Guardians fellow, isn't he?
Yeah, one of the Earth Guardians,
Yeah.
and the woman with the blonde hair to his right is his mother.
Oh, that's his mom.
Slide. We were also helping other activists. We helped Broomfield and Lafayette helped each other a lot. We would volunteer on each other's campaigns. As you know, the Broomfield vote was quite close, but they also succeeded in banning fracking. I'm not sure the status of their moratorium at this point. Slide. But by July, we were really rolling along quite well. And this is a meeting that took place in a community hall up in Lafayette called Nyland Community. And that's merely addressing some volunteers, sporting one of our new t-shirts that we created. And now we've got our website URL on the t-shirts, eastbocounited.org. Yeah.
And then that really tall guy, he's the member of that we got elected to the board in Lafayette, right?
Yeah, that's Tom Dowling, that's what I believe. You can even have fun when you have your parties. I think there's a cake that was made up by King Supers. That's me performing a song. I wrote a song, What Are We Fracking For? You can still see it on YouTube. And this is us celebrating at a brew pub in Louisville after we had a Lafayette City Council win. I'm not sure, I don't remember exactly what the win was about, but it was cause to celebrate. That's Marilee, Mandy, sorry, you can go back. David Fuller, who's just sitting down.
And then
Tom in the back, Tom Groover.
and me.
And, oh, and you, there.
And me.
Sorry.
No, I remember that. That was real nice.
And Cliff.
Isn't it when you handed in all the signatures?
I think so.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looks like some good microbrewery beers too.
Oh, yeah. That's a place in Louisville that's called,
Just had opened.
I forget. It's right on Main Street. Go ahead.
Summertime.
And so the stages of a campaign are is that you get your petition approved, then you get it printed up, and then the petition is where the people actually sign their names. This is a very regulated, strict process. It has to be very, very exact. And then you go out and you get your signatures, and then you have a window that you have to get your signatures by. And that's when you're in this race. You're in this race to get enough signatures to get it on the ballot. And just to get on the ballot is your big push. And so you're not even voting on it yet. That doesn't happen until the election night. So here's Marilee again, directing people who are all set up with computers to get people organized. We're handing out petitions to the volunteers that it's their responsibility to get the signatures in a correct way and then hand it back to their organizer when they fill their packet. A packet typically has about 50 signatures on it. Slide. There were a number of fundraising events. This is John Lamb in the middle, who's a longtime Lafayette resident and longtime activist in Lafayette. He's also a musician. He plays quite good blues guitar. And that's his daughter to his right, and that's another musician to his left, and they call their group Blues on the Lamb, and they were doing a fundraiser for us there in Lafayette. So that's another thing that can happen with your group and your community group. Once you get rolling, you get known, you can get other people helping you have fundraisers. This is me and David Fuller in his basement painting some signs. So now this is October. The election is going to be November 5th, so we're less than a month away from the election, and we're pulling out all the stops, to try to get people really aware of what we're going on. So we had the idea, hey, let's hang some banners off this bridge that's on an overpass in Lafayette. It goes over 287, where hundreds and thousands of cars go past each day. So David had a nice space in his basement, and I helped him paint these banners. So next slide. And that's us holding them up. That's David Fuller and Ann Griffin. And we're standing on the overpass on Emma Street in Lafayette, and we got a lot of people seeing this. We had people honking their horns and raising their hands. Slide. And then finally, on November 5th, election night, we were again in that community house, Nyland Community House, and anxiously, biting our fingernails as the results are coming in, and it turned out we did win by just over 60%. We had a great band there playing that night.